Hello, May 4th, 2015, 8:32 p.m. This is David Ben Ahayah. This is a private communication to the man Jim Makris acting as lead security of the Attorney General. Greetings, Jim. This is the face of the Christian minister you did call that one day. I realize, sir, that my Christian walk is new, and I may not be quite as versed in man's law and quite as much understanding as a minister that I would want to have. I sent you a letter back, Jim, a while back. I can't remember the exact date, but you did respond to me in an honorable phone call. I do thank you for that. You are playing by the rules. But I do notice my mistake, Jim, and I believe that the mistake was I gave you the option to just call me for a rebuttal and not actually give me any reason as to why I'm wrong or why the facts that were contained and all the information that you were privy to would be incorrect, giving the courts the authority to intimidate Christian ministers, and including the police officers and the court security as well. These are private men and women and acting under color of law. As you know, a corporation is de facto. You were de facto by declaration, by the claim Adrienne Clarkson made on her website. I believe it's 2008, Jim. Actually, I have it right here if you'd like to take a look at it. You also spoken to a friend of mine a while back, Jim, about men and women don't have to have driver's license. I have it on recording and to your admission that a man doesn't have to hold a valid driver's license and a man doesn't have to hold a insurance to travel the roadways on this land. You said that, Jim, in a phone call to Arthur Koborinsky, no longer affiliated with him as he is OPCA, three men on the land kind of business, and apparently, and unfortunately, that's just a bad gospel. But the fact remains, you did say that on the phone, Jim. Now, with all the facts that I'm presenting towards you, and plus the facts that I presented to you in that email, you have but 15 days to reply with a proper rebuttal and show me where you get the authority to have your court security intimidate me, take me, lock me in a cage, throw the key away, intimidate me for being a Christian minister, obstructing my ministry for, well, 2 times. The first time was only for a couple hours, but the next time I was locked in the cage, again carried by Derek Gray in the back of a police vehicle. Court security and the prosecution, and supposedly our counsel for that matter, also intimidated a woman by the name of Michelle Lynn, who I claim is my wife, in telling her that I could just be thrown away and locked away for 3-4 years or however many years they see fit. I can't remember the name of the woman, but I will surely get that to you because I'm invoking your duty of care, sir. You have some sort of standing in those courts. You have some sort of authority with them to direct these agents of Her Majesty in the proper way to take upon their duty of care as to not intimidate us, obstruct us, and essentially breach the public duty of care, public trust. My apologies. Common nuisance, intimidation, obstruction of ministry. They're very serious charges. They're all ecclesiastical. Well, the minister is 176 an ecclesiastical charge, Jim, but in order to obstruct a ministry, you have to intimidate and become a common nuisance. So that's where 423 and 180 fall into place. Not that I make use of your corporate codes or statutes, but by Ezekiel 33:6, I'm required to be your watchman. Jim, you seem like a nice gentleman and a very fair man who seems to want to play by the rules, and I pray that my heart is not wrong and the guidance of the Holy Spirit hasn't deceived me, which I know it hasn't because God never lies, that you are a man of worth, and to speak to you privately this way is the only communication I believe is going to be necessary unless you decide to rebut the facts on a phone call or by email and tell me that I'm wrong. You have statutory powers to have your agents in the courts intimidate me. That I'm wrong, that the Queen never did take an oath to defend the law of God. That I'm wrong, that you as her agent, excuse me, an agent of Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor, of the House of Windsor, sworn agent of her, if you are indeed on the proper oath, as prescribed in the Federal Oath of Allegiance Act, if you're on that oath, you do have a duty of care to protect me, and Christians like me, people who cling to the King James Bible and practice their faith in it under the Queen's watch. Now, I have returned all my corporate identification back to you. I have brought an asseveration forward. Unfortunately, it wasn't taken seriously, but it is on file. I do believe I sent it all back to the Registrar General. You can see that in signed document from the post office that I have. Jim, I'm just asking you for honor. And no, I'm not asking. I'm demanding that you exercise the duty of care. At this point, I have no other alternative but to bring you into private awareness, to let you know that I've exhausted every other form of trying to communicate with the private men and women of the Halton Police Force, and to let them know verbally that I'm a Christian minister, and unfortunately this has no standing. They're still acting under presumption. Well, I'm removing the presumption that I'm a person. Section 35 of the Canadian Interpretations Act defines what a person is. And I know, and you know, that a person is not made of flesh, and it does not walk around and breathe, and it certainly does not asseverate about Christ. All it does is lie there dead. That's why it's offensive to me to have an all-caps variation in the form of something like my name, which is not my name. And it's a violation of my faith to show respect to person. James 2:9, Romans 2:11, Acts 10:34, 2 Samuel 14:14, Deuteronomy 1:17, Deuteronomy 10:17, and a whole other slew of scriptures that I could offer you in paper, but I believe James 2:9 is sufficient enough in itself. One command in the King James Bible is quite enough for me. I don't need repetition from God in order to obey Him. I need one command. Now, unlike the false god government of Canada registered to the United States Securities and Exchange Commission, God gives me freedom of choice. And I've chosen to obey His law, His 10 laws, and the King James Bible, founded on examples on how to live your life in obedience to those laws, in fact, to the point where I have to reject your code, statutes, regulations, rules, ordinances of men, because they no longer fall in line with God's law, and they are not written for His sake anymore. They're written for financial purposes, drafted by Parliament, manufactured by Parliament, put out by the Parliament of Canada, the Corporation of Canada, in order to make money off of the hard-working backs of the men and women. Only would have to look up the Canadian Control and Determination Act, or the Canadian Control Ownership and Determination Act, Regulation 1984, Schedule 2. Shows you the value of the annuities of all the men and women that's traded on the stock exchange in connection to the birth certificate with the all caps last name. This is a system of mammon, Jim, and I can't take part in it, and neither can anybody within my ministry, within the Safety of Truth Ministries from the Citadel, which is where I bring you this message from, my sanctuary. So that being said, Jim, the facts are on the table. Now my questions are, do you have the intention to intimidate a Christian minister now that you are in awareness of my ministry? And do you have the intention to allow agents serving under you to continue to intimidate me and Michelle? Next question is, do I have the right to be a Christian? Well, certainly you can't answer no to that, but if you do, I want you to call me and have a chat with me. Does it not say in the Charter, the Canadian Charter, Section 32, that all the laws of Canada apply to agents of the government, not private individuals? The top of the preamble, or in the preamble, at the very top of the Canadian Charter, it says that the Charter recognizes the supremacy of God and the rule of law. Well, that's the supremacy of God, referring to His rule of law, the 10 Commandments, and the King James Bible. Just wondering why the government of Canada would feel like it needs to use a bait and switch program to lure us into believing this is a free country by putting God at the top of their preamble Baiting us in with God's law, switching it out for man's law. That's fraud. Man's law is an addition to Deuteronomy 4:2. It violates Deuteronomy 4:2, therefore I cannot submit, and I can't submit to your agents. So I'm asking you, Jim, once again, do you have the authority to intimidate a Christian minister and to violate his faith and beliefs? Are you not required to keep the Criminal Code of Canada while in public office? Particularly Section 423, 176, 180, 296, which is another thing I'd like to speak to you on a different note about, and 122, and in some cases 164, where we're openly verbally threatened by people in your courts, the men and women in your courts acting in their corporate capacities, using verbal threats, telling us we're going to get locked up for being Christians. That's all I hear. I don't care about codes and rules. All I hear is Christians are being persecuted. I'm one of them. Why is this happening, Jim? I need you to answer these questions honorably, sir, and or rebut the facts that I've placed before you in an honorable phone call. If you cannot, if you fail to respond to me in 15 days with a honorable rebuttal and an answer to those questions, do you have the authority to intimidate Christian ministers? Do you have the authority to allow the agents underneath you to intimidate Christian ministers? Do we not have a right to freedom of conscience according to your charter? Do we not have the freedom to leave Canada anytime we want according to your charter? I've left Canada. I don't want any part of it. It's fraud and it's against God. It's mammon. It's commercial by nature. And I do not consent. And if you believe you have any authority to compel me to take part in such a violation of faith in the King James Bible, you only have but to make a phone call and tell me why. Otherwise, after 15 days, you agree you or anybody else have no authority to intimidate Christian ministers, that you will uphold your proper sworn oath to Her Majesty the Queen, styled as Defender of the Faith in the Royal Styles and Titles Act, same Queen that took an oath to maintain God's law. You agree that because of these facts, you have your hands are tied. You're gonna have to stop bringing charges, stop bringing claims, accusations against us for practicing our faith. Not necessarily you, but the prosecution, but I know you are involved with court security, and these are the men that are using their hands to intimidate us and obstruct our ministry. They have become a common nuisance, as you will be if the intimidation continues in these courtrooms. You are privately liable, sir. You are in awareness. I do ask you to practice duty of care. Thank you very much for your time, Jim. And again, I don't use your codes or laws. I know they're copyrighted. They're not for my use. I only simply quote them to you in good faith, under the understanding that in Ezekiel 33:6, I'm required to be your watchman and not let you harm yourself by ignoring this video, by ignoring the codes, by being ignorant of anything. You are in full awareness. You have a duty of care, and I would expect and appreciate court security from now on to treat us Christians with love and honor. And it is agreed to that. If you do so fail to respond to this video, phone call, anything, make sure you do record these, because some people can be dishonest. I'm not saying I advocate that. I would be very admitted if you did call. It'd be an interesting conversation. But remember to do your diligence and always protect yourself. Ezekiel 33:6. David Ben Ahayah, Minister of Truth Ministries, within the confines of the Citadel, signing off.